The modern music industry is an incredibly calculated machine. Long before a pop star ever steps onto a stage, every single millimeter of their image has been heavily scrutinized, debated, and engineered by a small army of professionals. There are image consultants dictating the color palette of their wardrobe, public relations teams crafting perfectly sanitized backstories, and stylists sourcing custom jewel-encrusted footwear that costs more than a luxury vehicle. In this world, authenticity is often just another manufactured product sold to the highest bidder. To reach the pinnacle of global stardom, you are expected to play the game, follow the unspoken rules, and look flawless under the blinding stadium lights. But what happens when an artist decides to completely shatter that meticulously crafted illusion? Imagine the scene, a massive echoing auditorium packed with thousands of expectant fans. The cameras are rolling, broadcasting to millions of living rooms around the globe. The lights dim, the heavy silence falls, and a vocalist walks out to the center microphone. But instead of wearing designer heels or trendy sneakers, she is completely barefoot. This isn't a wardrobe malfunction. It isn't a desperate, quirky attempt to go viral on social media. It is a deliberate, high-stakes, and deeply personal rebellion. For global vocal sensation Jordan, walking onto the biggest stages in the world without shoes is her defining trademark. Yet the true story behind this choice is far more complex, emotional, and controversial than the casual viewer could ever imagine. It is a story of childhood innocence colliding with the ruthless entertainment machine, and the truth behind her barefoot tradition will completely change how you view her music. To truly understand the gravity of this tradition, we have to travel back in time, far away from the flashing paparazzi cameras and the sprawling mansions of Los Angeles. The origin of this story doesn't take place in a corporate boardroom or a high-end recording studio. It begins on a cold, quiet street when she was just 6 years old. Long before she was a household name, she was simply a child traveling with her family, absorbing the world with wide-eyed curiosity. During her travels, she crossed paths with an orphaned girl of her exact same age. The air was biting, the ground was freezing, and yet this young girl had absolutely nothing on her feet. For most people, this is the kind of fleeting, tragic moment you might feel sympathy for before moving on with your day. But for a 6-year-old, it was a moment of profound, world-altering realization. She couldn't understand how the universe could be so incredibly unbalanced, how she could have a suitcase full of clothes while a girl standing right in front of her didn't even have basic protection from the frozen pavement. In an act of pure, unfiltered empathy, took off her own shoes and handed them over. But the exchange didn't end there. In that quiet moment, made a silent, unshakable vow. She promised herself that she would never wear shoes on a stage until every single child in the world had a pair of their own. It was the kind of idealistic, beautiful promise that children make, a promise that the harsh realities of growing up usually erase. But was not a usual child, and this was not a promise she was ever going to break. Fast forward to 2014. The stage is set for Norway's Got Talent. When an 8-year-old walked out in a simple white dress, completely barefoot, the judges and the audience were visibly confused. The visual simply didn't make sense. She looked incredibly fragile, almost out of place. But the second she opened her mouth to sing the Billie Holiday classic Gloomy Sunday, the entire atmosphere in the room shifted. Out of this tiny, shoeless girl came a vocal tone so dark, rich, and historically weathered that it felt like she was channeling the ghost of a jazz legend from the 1940s. The contrast was staggering. The video of that performance exploded, tearing through the internet and racking up tens of millions of views almost overnight. But with explosive, viral fame comes an incredibly dark side. The internet is not a kind place for a child. While millions praised her extraordinary talent, an equal number of people began to scrutinize her every move. The barefoot tradition, initially seen as a charming quirk, suddenly found itself under a harsh, cynical microscope. The weight of the spotlight can crush even the most seasoned adult entertainers, leading many down paths of severe struggle and personal turmoil. For an 8-year-old, the pressure was unimaginably heavy. She wasn't just being judged on her vocal pitch or her song choices, her entire persona was being dissected globally. How could a child process songs about heartbreak, loss, and sorrow while standing barefoot in front of a screaming crowd? The juxtaposition was haunting, and it left the world wanting more, but also demanding answers. As her star continued to rise, the whispers in the shadows grew into a deafening roar. Critics, industry insiders, and online commentators began to launch severe accusations. They argued that there was no way a child could organically maintain such a heavy, philanthropic vow. The barefoot tradition was suddenly labeled a calculated, cynical marketing gimmick. Theories surfaced alleging that her management team or her family were actively forcing her to remain shoeless to manipulate the audience's emotions and secure votes. They claimed it was a psychological ploy, a way to make her appear more vulnerable and sympathetic to a global audience. In the ruthless world of show business, where child stars are routinely packaged and sold as commodities, these accusations were incredibly damaging. They threatened to overshadow her actual raw talent. If the public believed her trademark was a corporate lie, her credibility as a genuine artist would be destroyed before she even hit her teenage years. Yet in the face of this intense scrutiny, did something entirely unexpected. She didn't release defensive statements. She didn't hire a crisis PR team to rebrand her image. She simply remained entirely silent on the accusations, letting the critics exhaust themselves. She kept showing up venue after venue, television show after television show without a single piece of footwear. She absorbed the criticism and used it as fuel, determined to prove that her physical presentation was merely a footnote to the undeniable power of her voice. But that wasn't the whole story. The true test of her resolve didn't come in Europe, it came on the most intimidating entertainment stage on the planet, America's Got Talent, The Champions. By 2020 was a teenager. The cute child prodigy narrative was fading and she needed to establish herself as a formidable, mature artist. Stepping onto the American primetime stage is a completely different beast. The production value is massive, the stakes are career-defining, and the judges are notoriously hard to impress. Once again, against the advice of conventional industry standards, she walked out barefoot. This time she tackled Queen's legendary masterpiece, Bohemian Rhapsody. It was a monumental risk. Doing a dark, jazzy rendition of one of the most protected rock anthems in history could have been a career-ending disaster. But as she stood grounded, her bare feet connecting directly with the stage, she delivered a performance so hauntingly beautiful and emotionally charged that it left the entire auditorium paralyzed. Supermodel didn't even hesitate, slamming the golden buzzer and sending gold confetti raining down on the shoeless teenager. In that exact moment, the barefoot tradition transformed. It was no longer viewed as a childhood quirk or a debated gimmick. It was cemented as the undeniable signature of an absolute powerhouse. She had conquered the toughest crowd in the world without compromising a single piece of her personal integrity. And what happened next would shock everyone who thought they understood the glamorous life of a music sensation. Behind the golden confetti and the viral YouTube clips lies a harsh, physical reality that viewers rarely consider. Performing barefoot is not merely a stylistic choice, it is physically demanding and often incredibly uncomfortable. We are talking about colossal, industrial stages. These floors are often built from cold, unforgiving steel, covered in sharp wiring, stray splinters, and the chaotic debris of a massive production crew. During outdoor winter performances in Scandinavia, the ground temperatures drop well below freezing, while the backup musicians are wrapped in heavy coats and thick boots stands on the ice-cold floor entirely unprotected. There is a sensory overload that comes with feeling every vibration, every cold draft, and every sharp edge of a stage. The physical toll of maintaining this vow is staggering. Yet she pushes through the discomfort, gig after gig. This physical sacrifice is perhaps the greatest evidence against the marketing gimmick theory. No artist, no matter how dedicated to their brand, would endure years of freezing, hazardous conditions if the motivation didn't stem from a deeply ingrained, unbreakable personal conviction. The bare feet are her literal and metaphorical connection to the ground, keeping her anchored in a reality that fame constantly tries to distort. The next phase of her journey required a massive leap of faith. Relocating to Los Angeles, the undisputed capital of the entertainment industry, brought a whole new set of brutal challenges. LA is a city famous for chewing up viral sensations and spitting them out when they are no longer trendy. When signed with a major label, the expectations shifted dramatically. The industry machinery wanted to mold her into the next mainstream pop idol. They wanted the glamorous photo shoots, the high-end fashion deals, and the manufactured pop anthems. But dug her bare heels in. The transition from a cover-singing prodigy to a self-sufficient, original songwriter was fiercely independent. She began crafting her own lyrics, pulling from deep emotional wells and heavily referencing the jazz and blues legends that originally inspired her. In this new, ruthless environment, her decision to remain barefoot took on a completely new meaning. It became an ultimate symbol of artistic autonomy. By refusing to conform to standard dress codes at high-profile industry events, she was sending a clear, defiant message to the executives. You can distribute my music, you can book my venues, but you cannot own my identity. Her bare feet became a silent protest against the commodification of artists, proving that true star power cannot be bought, packaged, or forced into a pair of designer stilettos. Fame is inherently intoxicating, and history is littered with the tragic stories of young stars who lost their minds navigating it. The psychological pressure of having millions of strangers constantly commenting on your appearance, your voice, and your personal life is a burden that most adults cannot handle. So how has managed to remain so incredibly grounded, avoiding the typical pitfalls and controversies that plague former child stars? Psychologists often speak about the necessity of a grounding mechanism for individuals living in high-stress, chaotic environments. For that mechanism is entirely literal. Her barefoot tradition forces her to remain physically and mentally connected to the earth. When the lights are blinding and the screams are deafening, the physical sensation of the cold stage beneath her feet pulls her back to reality. It snaps her out of the illusion of celebrity and reminds her of the 6-year-old girl who made a promise to a stranger. It is a daily, physical reminder of her core values, ensuring that her ego never outgrows her empathy. It is the ultimate protective shield against the toxic narcissism that the music industry so frequently breeds. So as we look at the incredible trajectory of Jordan's career, we are left with a profoundly inspiring realization. The barefoot tradition is not merely a relic of a viral moment, nor is it a clever PR strategy designed to game the algorithm. It is the beating heart of her entire artistic existence. It is a bridge connecting her incredible God-given talent with a deep, unwavering commitment to human empathy. In a world where everyone is desperately trying to be something they are not, she has achieved global domination simply by remaining exactly who she is. She forces every single person watching to ask themselves a difficult question. What are the promises you made to yourself before the world told you who you were supposed to be, and how many of us would actually have the strength to keep them? Jordan doesn't just sing songs, she tells stories of resilience, authenticity, and rebellion. And she does it all while standing firmly on her own 2 feet, completely bare, ready to take on the world.